Hey everybody, welcome back to Breakfast with Bob from Challenge Miami. My name is Bob Babbitt. We're brought to you by Challenge North America, City Bikes, Veneto, Challenge Athletes Foundation, Florida Dairy Farmers, and Wahoo. Our next guest, Pablo Gomez from Bogota, Colombia. How you doing, Pablo?
Hey Bob, how are you?
I am wonderful. So tell me a little bit about your background. When did you start out as a runner, a swimmer? What sport were you into first?
I actually played tennis until I was 15, 16 years old.
Okay.
Had a shoulder injury, and the doctor was like, you have to stop playing for 2 months and just to stay in shape. I started running with my dad.
Yes.
Who has been a runner for I don't know how many years, his entire life basically.
Yeah.
Adult life, and we just started running, did a 10K race, and kind of met some friends that did triathlons, and one thing took to the other, and just came into the sport.
When you got into the sport, were you thinking Olympics? Was that the original thought, or what?
I got a very early wake-up call because basically at that time in Colombia, all the races were draft legal.
Yes.
And I was put with the junior elite from my first race, basically.
Yes.
And I came out of the water like a minute and a half, 2 minutes behind the pack, like the last pack.
So it's easy to find your bike.
Yeah, it was very easy. And so, it became pretty apparent that it was a very hard way to do it through the Olympic system.
Right.
And I think it takes a very specific type of athlete nowadays, and we have seen that. And
yes.
I think we're seeing that in long distance nowadays.
Yes, we are.
And so it just, I decided to kind of path my own way and go through the non-draft legal, which meant moving to the States when I was 18. As soon as I graduated high school, I moved to Austin to go to school and race non-draft legal races.
So when you moved to the States, triathlon was a big part of that.
Yeah, it was the main reason, really. I had a spot in the best university in Colombia.
Yes.
Which is a private university, and I was going to study business there.
Yeah.
And I declined the spot, and I decided to come to community college, do 2 years of community college, and train with a coach in Austin, Texas.
Now, what did your parents think of that? You've got this opportunity to go to this great college at home.
So I played them a little bit because I was like, let's take 6 months and just do the triathlon thing for 6 months. But the coach that I found in Austin, he was like, no, you have to study and train. You're not going to just train. Like, that's not going to work out with me.
Yes.
And so I just, I found the community college, which I think nowadays it was the best choice I could have made at that time. It allowed me to have time for training and also, a great education. I think it was also cheaper than going to school in Colombia.
Okay.
Which worked. Yeah. And it just kind of the 6 months became 10 years, and I moved last year back home. And after 9 years in the States.
So during those 9 years in the States, you've been racing triathlons?
Yes.
Mainly 70.3 distance? What distance do you feel is best?
I think 70.3 is my distance, but I also found that, doing sprint and Olympic distance non-draft was just such a great learning curve, especially for somebody that had very little background. I mean, I started riding mountain bikes when I was 6 with my dad, but that's not, that teaches you how to ride a bike and feel comfortable pedaling up and downhill, but I think just that learning curve of doing sprint and Olympic distance was instrumental for me.
Yeah. And when you look at your results over the last decade, what do you look at as your best race?
I think the time when I realized maybe I can do something in the sport and take this a little bit more seriously was when I did a USAT Nationals, age group Nationals, which is a very competitive race in Milwaukee. And I went I want to say 158 for the Olympic distance.
So it's up 2 hours. That's great.
Yeah, and that was I finished 11th in my age group, and I was like, wow, that's some great level, but that's also a good level for me. Sub 2 hours, I can do something with that, and I can just keep improving. And so that's the time I realized okay, I can start racing more seriously. And which was good when I first moved to the States. The competition in Austin in my age group was very limited, and so my coach at the time, he decided to put me to race in the open wave. And so since I was 18, I was racing with, older guys and just racing the big guys.
The best guys,
The best guys. And so it just allowed me to have a lot of really good competition in those early years. And by the time that I went sub 2 in the Olympic distance, I kind of took an extra step in that field too.
And now, have you stretched out to do a full Ironman yet, or what's your goals?
The goal is Kona. I think like I got into the sport because of Ironman Kona,
Right.
and I want to do that. But I also look at the guys that are doing well in Kona, and they are 10 years, 11 years older than me. You know, they are.
Yeah, you're a young guy.
Yeah, they are 36, 37. And I especially look at a guy like Ben Hoffman. You know, he has been my reference since I moved. I met him before my first half Ironman in Boulder in 2011.
Yeah.
I had a chance to meet him, and he was kind of like an up-and-coming pro.
Yep.
And now you look at Ben, and he's the best marathon run in an Ironman, and it takes time. And I think you have to give your body time to get to that point where you are efficient at that distance. And I've tested with the Ironman distance. I've never done a full one. I did the swim and the bike from Ironman Texas last year, just because as a pro, it was easy to kind of get into the race. And I just wanted to see like how far my body will go.
Right.
And it was pretty
It was pretty beat up.
Yeah.
You couldn't imagine running a marathon when you were done with that bike ride, huh?
No, I think you also approach the bike very differently when you know that you're gonna get to
Right.
T2 and you're gonna have some flip flops in your bag. So it's very different.
That's the best way to do that type of
Absolutely,
that type of
absolutely.
race. It's interesting with Ben because when Ben signed on with Ryan Bolton as his coach,
Yeah.
and started training for the run with Caroline
Rotich.
Rotich and training with the woman who won Boston Marathon. Ryan told me, he said, watch Ben.
Yeah.
He's gonna we didn't see the results for a couple of years. Then all of a sudden you start seeing the 230s and the low 240s. But it is a process, and I'm guessing being a young guy, it's a process.
And I think also Tim O'Donnell is another example of
Yes.
somebody that has come through the ranks in some ways, but also just done the process. And I think this sport takes a lot of patience, and I've seen that with a lot of the guys that I used to race in age group early on, in that 20 to 24 age group. Some guys that will just beat me any day, they were burned out.
They're gone.
Yeah, they're gone. It's a sport that really churns people out because it takes time. Sadly it takes money too, and
it does.
And you need to I found a job in a bike shop 2 years into being in the States because it's expensive. It's expensive to do the sport, and so it just takes time. And I think that I've decided to just take the way and just go step by step and path my own way.
Now, back home in Bogota, how is the sport growing?
It's huge. I think huge, quote unquote. You know, cycling is basically our national sport or second national sport after soccer.
Yeah.
And so it's just anywhere you go, you will see a bike, and you will see bikes in any social level. And so cycling is very big. And I think triathlon, since we had the introduction of the 70.3 race back in 2016, that just exploded because the race sold out every year and sells out every year, and you have 3,000, 2,000, 3,000 participants. And I think that just trickles down to other distances and other events. And I think the pandemic was also, or has been, kind of like a moment for new races to come up. Yes. And so we have friends. I have two really good friends that decided to start doing these Swift races, kind of like, grassroots Swift races. And now they are like real races in real life.
Yes.
And it's all triathletes, and they did an event yesterday or Sunday, and they had 300 people.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So you're seeing, even coming out of the pandemic, you're seeing growth in the sport.
I think so. Yeah. I think a big limiting factor for us is just the economic factor.
Right.
It's expensive just because when you go from dollars to Colombian pesos, it makes the sport very expensive. But people that have the disposable income and some others that maybe don't really have it, they just make it happen. And I think that's something that I've realized the last year living there is a lot of people. We don't have a lot of the opportunities that you get here in the States as far as just things, and people just make it happen. Training happens anyways, with the opportunities or without, and just people make it happen, and that has been a great eye-opening for me.
Well, that's what's great about this sport. It's sort of the equal opportunity abuser. It doesn't really care what money you have in your bank account. You're going to suffer if you're a millionaire or if you're a guy just trying to get through the day.
Absolutely.
Everybody's going to suffer the same way.
Yeah.
Have you had a chance to ride the course?
Yesterday, yeah, I did yesterday, and it's great. I think it's going to be a little bit more challenging than I had the chance to ride Daytona a couple years ago. That's actually where I got my pro card, in Challenge Daytona. And it was in Daytona you could do the oval, and here the
Road
bike
course.
course is going to be the road course, and I found it challenging in some of the turns. You know, the wind is really strong sometimes, and you think you can take them in your aero bars, and all of a sudden you're mid-turn, and it's like your front wheel is moving, and you're like, okay, you kind of have to commit.
Let's stay upright.
Yeah,
Let's not be
yeah.
on the. I don't want to be on the ground.
No.
No, but there's a lot of turns. There'll be a lot of wind because you
Yeah.
guys will be in the middle of the day.
Yeah, yeah.
It'll be not. You got to be a bike handler on this course.
It'll be fun, I think. I want to see also how the 20 meter rule goes, because it's, you know, I've done only 70.3 professional 70.3 races through Ironman, and those are, you know, 12 meters.
Yes.
I think the 20 meter is going to be also an equalizer in some ways, and I feel like I am a strong cyclist. Like, I
Yes.
found myself pulling the packs in some of the 70.3s that I've done.
Yes.
And that's not going to happen here. You know, guys are not going to be able to pile up behind, so that's going to be great.
Yeah, we saw that at Challenge Daytona. That 20 meter rule made it a time trial. It was, but this will be interesting because of the turns and because the wind, people will misjudge their distance between each other.
Yeah.
It's gonna be pretty.
And
interesting.
I don't know how it's gonna work. I think, like I told my coach yesterday, the power is very inconsistent. You know, you can be
Yes.
going 300 watts on one straight and 200 watts in the other because the wind is so strong. So
Yeah.
you kind of have to play with that. I don't think you can like marry yourself to a power number,
Right.
because it's gonna make your race very
It's gonna
uncomfortable.
change every lap.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do you look at as your best race that you've had so far as a pro?
Galveston 70.3 in 2019.
Mhm.
Yeah, I guess we lost 1 year. That was my first pro race, and I think that was just like it's a race I've done many times because I lived in Texas, and
Right.
I was, you know, had nothing to lose. And I think after that I started, you know, like it's just one of those things of being a young pro that like maybe I didn't have all the tools to. I don't want to say pressure, but just like I wasn't maybe fully ready to tackle some of the things. And I think weight, for example, like body image and weight was a challenge that I had that first year as a pro. It's just like you stand next to guys that are, you know, 5% body fat, and you're like, well, I'm pretty fit, but I'm not that fit. Does that matter?
It
and
matters.
I think, yeah, it's just like realizing how it matters more than that it matters. It's what it was changed for me, you know, and like
Yeah.
it definitely that was a big challenge for me.
Because the hard part is the balance, right? If you get too lean, you can't push the bike.
Exactly.
But if you're really lean, you can supposedly run faster.
Yeah, and then you get people, and this is a reality that just, you know, like you stop eating and then your body starts gaining weight because you're under so much stress that it's just like you put on fat. And it's like I think that was an eye-opening for me. Just, you know, like I thought I had like everything under control, and that for me was like, oh wow, like I need to work on some stuff.
Right.
And I think like I've gotten a good way on
Well,
that.
you're young. You got plenty of time.
Yeah.
What was the toughest part for you coming from Bogota and moving to Texas? Did you say Austin? were you
Austin,
in?
yeah.
Yeah. That's a little bit of a transition.
It was a change, and it's funny. I'm somebody that likes to look at places. Like when I go to travel somewhere, I'm pretty good at like knowing where I'm going.
Yes.
And for Austin, I was like, I don't want to know. I just want to get there and discover that city. And I got there, and it was amazing. You know, like I think people have a lot of preconceptions about the United States and about Texas, and you see the movies and you see things, and then you get to Austin and
See all
it's
the
like
cowboys.
you see all the cowboys, and you get to Austin and you see a bunch of hippie cowboys, but you don't see cowboys.
Hippie cowboys. Yeah.
Yeah.
You go down to 6th Street there.
You go
right?
down to
Yeah.
6th Street, you go down to South Congress, and really I had amazing years in Austin, but it was hard. Every time that I come to Miami, I remember that I came to Miami like 2 or 3 months after moving to Austin.
Yeah.
And after getting back to Austin, I told my parents, like, I want to move to Miami. Like, I don't want to be in Austin anymore. This is hard. And it was hard. I want to say the first 6 months, it was very hard just because you are not, I was still kind of trying to live my life in Colombia and have my life in the States. But at that time I said, like, just to be able to be successful here, I have to like realize that my life is here. I have to commit. And I made the commitment, and it lasted 9 years. Yeah.
And how was it moving back? Was that hard?
It was hard. Plus, I did it also in the middle of, you know, like they were shutting down borders, and that's literally I got into the country 2 days before they closed the borders, and so I was already planning on moving back. You know, like visa situations and things like that. I had finished grad school and finished a year of work, and it was time. And I also felt like it was time. You know, like I was getting tired, and I wanted a change, and And so when I got there, it was 2 weeks of quarantine with mom and dad, and
that's a change.
That's a change after living 9 years on your own. That's a change, but they are fantastic, and they have really taken. I also used the opportunity to kind of take a step more into my professional career as an athlete, and just commit more into training. And so now I'm working part-time and I'm training full-time, which I didn't. Before it was the other way. I worked full-time and I trained part-time, and so now I work part-time. Remotely, which is great, with a company in the States. And then
what type of work do you do?
I do business analysis with a solar.
So you got a real job.
Yeah, I got a real job. Yeah, and I coach a couple athletes. So it's great. Like you have to. It's a sport where we don't have NFL contracts.
Right.
And unless you're Mr. Frodino who is doing laps out there,
I know.
I think it's pretty hard. And so I have the opportunity that I have a graduate degree and I have an undergrad degree, so I want to use that too on my advantage. And so so,
what's great is being able to have that degree means that you can do this for fun, right? This is obviously you want to be the best, but you also travel the world, meet great people, and that your future, you can tie in your degree to what you're doing here.
Yeah, and it takes a little bit of stress off your shoulders on the day-to-day. I think I've seen, I'm good friends with other pros that have committed without a job, and it's very tough. And I don't know if that's extra stress of not knowing if you're gonna make rent next month.
Right.
I don't know how that helps.
Doesn't help.
And so I think that just having this job, it also allows me to kind of switch off my mind in times that I'm not training. I think Alistair Brownlee was finishing a master's degree when he won his first Olympics. So I think that shows that anybody can do something else outside the sport.
Great to meet you.
Thank you, Bob. Big fan of you, and really, I think I told you that your podcast was the first podcast I've ever listened to ever in my life.
Wow!
Back in 2011, I think, and it was I remember just listening to your interviews with Paul Huddle, and my sister is actually a big fan. She did triathlons for a little bit, and now she just follows the sport. And she actually told me that anytime that Kona comes, she watches Breakfast with Bob and just makes sure that that's how she knows who is racing, how they are looking. And so I've been a big fan. With my previous coach, with Jason, we followed your interviews, and we actually used to say, take me back, like the way you used to.
My producer's laughing at that.
So thank you, Bob, and thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Pablo Gomez has been our guest, everybody. Again, thank you for tuning in. Breakfast with Bob from Challenge Miami. Hold on, we've got a full day of great interviews. Thanks, everybody.